Good evening and welcome to Legal Tech Live, episode 89. I am here with two fantastic women, one startup founder, one practicing lawyer. Nicole Clark is our guest tonight. She is the CEO of Trellis Research, or Trellis Legal Intelligence. Prior to founding Trellis, Nicole Clark was a business litigation and labor and employment attorney who handled litigation in both state and federal courts. Frustrated by sending internal emails and collecting anecdotes on judges in order to make strategic case recommendations, she built Trellis to solve her own need for access to data, information, and analytics at the state court level. Thank you, Nicole, for coming back to the show. You were with us on episode 41, which was January of last year.
Wow, you guys have more than doubled since then.
More than doubled since then, and you've had some great growth since then. And our co-host tonight, people will remember, previous co-host is Kimberly Bennett. She's a trademark and business strategy attorney and founder of K. Bennett Law, LLC, a boutique subscription legal services law firm that helps small businesses protect their brands and grow profitable and sustainable seven-figure organizations. Thank you, Kim, for being back on your birthday week. And I asked her to join on her birthday because last time I asked her to join, it was way late in the afternoon and she actually did it. So thank you for being here. Nicole.
What a birthday present.
You had, right? It was a great birthday present. And so now I'll have to send her a gift. Nicole, give us, for those who didn't hear episode 41, give us a little bit about your elevator pitch, what Trellis does, just sort of, and then we'll roll from there.
Absolutely. So I'm co-founder, CEO of Trellis. Trellis is a legal research and analytics platform that focuses on the state trial court level. And as you mentioned, Trellis was born out of my own frustration. So I practiced primarily labor and employment, which is heavily litigated at the state trial court level. And I just couldn't believe that lawyers didn't have access to the practical information of the judges that we were appearing before, the way opposing counsel has handled similar matters, just insight into the state trial court space. And so really tired of being the one to send out an email, firm-wide, asking if anyone had intelligence on our judge, and then collecting anecdotes and making recommendations. I decided that I believed that this data was really valuable. And one of the reasons was I was writing a motion late at night, and my colleague said that he thought he had appeared before my judge previously. Turned out he had a ruling that was by my judge. And I used that as an outline for my motion, and I won. And I wrote it in half the time. And I just realized that there was all this untapped state trial court data out there that none of the big players in the space were focusing on. And so what we did was we started collecting data, and I used it for a number of years before making the full jump. I really wanted to make sure that this data was going to be valuable and that I had a viable product here if I was going to make the leap. And my motion practice changed so dramatically that it's what gave me the courage to jump from litigation into entrepreneurship. So here we are.
And here you are, and you've just had wild couple of years. You got a pretty good seed investment right around the time you appeared on the show last time. It was within a short time after that, I think a 7-figure investment, and then another 7-figure investment, I believe, earlier this year.
That's correct.
And picked up a really impressive board of director or board member with David Sachs, who has been an angel investor in Facebook and Palantir, SpaceX.
Founding COO of PayPal. CEO of Yammer. I mean, the list goes on.
The list goes on. It's impressive. And what's really awesome about it is I don't know any other legal tech company that has got, so you're on to something, I think. Awesome. That for you to get a board member like that, I thought was really impressive. That goes without saying, because I was just blown away with how impressive you were and the tool was last time. But tell us what has changed. You were focused primarily on California at that time.
Correct.
still primarily California,
So
or are you?
we're still live in California. However, we have a big push that's coming. So Q2, we're live not only in New York, which was our plan, but New York, Texas, and Florida. So we're going to be starting Q2 with a real bang. So that's going to be amazing. And to take us back, you're absolutely right. The last year has been amazing and a wild roller coaster. So one of the other things that you didn't mention yet was I had a technical co-founder join me, who is Alon Schwartz, who was the CTO of a company called DocStock, which sold to Intuit, and they were primarily a legal contracts company that provided, that was almost a legal Zoom for your SMBs. And so they were the largest database of state court records, also a freemium based company. And so all of that SEO expertise has come over and has been a huge benefit at Trellis, and was one of the reasons that we were able to pour more fuel on the fire, because with him coming in, we changed up our customer acquisition strategy a little bit, and it started working. and so, you know, the pieces fall into place a little bit after that.
That's fantastic. That's great to hear. Kim, please join in.
Yeah, I'm just listening. I mean, I think it's great to hear the journey, you know, especially listening to where you were a year and a half ago. I know that like so much is happening in the world, so I'm you know, interested in seeing how that's impacted too. But you know, before we probably jump into that, I just you know, it's good to hear the story and that it's continued and that you're about to do this next major push to the other states, which I think is interesting. And funny enough, I actually started in labor and employment too. So.
Oh, did you?
Not as a litigator, though. I was in-house. So, but yeah.
Oh, well, lucky you. It's the interesting thing about litigation with employment is it's heavily emotionally charged. And so there's just the litigation is there's a lot of discovery and motion practice back and forth because emotion's involved. And so one of the reasons that I just needed access to this data, needed access to information, and just couldn't believe no one had done it yet.
And one of the, I had to re-listen, which I don't always do, Nicole. I don't always re-listen to my own podcast because it's really annoying. But I had to re-listen just because I wanted to see where you'd come from. Sure. Interestingly enough, what you did, what one of your driving goals was to give lawyers more of their time back.
Yes.
And you were so exhausted by the fact that you had to go around for these anecdotes, right? Maybe exhausted is the wrong word, but frustrated potentially.
Yeah. Exhausted with a combination of many other words.
Yeah, is that I had to go and get an anecdote from somebody else in the firm about how this judge thinks and what they do. And Trellis, which I've played on the platform, we've done a few things together in the past, and I've played on the platform.
Oh, you got to try it again. We've come so far since then.
I bet you have. Was that you could review these tentative rulings, and are you still focusing on the tentative rulings of judges so
not strictly. Basically, the tentative rulings are where I like, and really rulings in general. So that can include orders or anything where the judge is giving their substantive analysis of the why they're going to grant or deny the motion. That's the focus that I like to live in for the legal research functionality. So when I want to see the way that a judge thinks about a particular cause of action, or the way a judge has ruled on particular issues. And the same goes for opposing counsel and, you know, looking them up, finding their cases. I like to live in the rulings for that because the judge often gives a ton of background on the case and why he's going to grant or deny the motion. So there's just incredibly useful information there. But we also have dockets, and now we're building out the underlying case files in our cases as well. So we're going very broad with the ultimate intent to be a Google for your state trial court data. Whether that is you're looking for analytics on your judge, you're looking for information about a case, you're looking up information or records, anything that lives at the trial court level, that's really the space that we're focused on.
A lot of what you are doing now, is that driven by, I know when I heard your last episode, you know, users were pushing, like using it, telling other people about it. That was part of the strategy. I know you talked about that shifted since, but like what you're doing now and how you've, you know, shifted or even double down on the state court
Yeah.
data.
Yeah.
Is that from users?
Well, that's a
why you guys did that?
phenomenal question. So I think previously I was still trying to go, around January 2019, I was still trying to go enterprise B2B. So we sell into large law firms, and I would try and get individual users there to be champions for the product. We've fully doubled down on that approach to go entirely bottoms up. So the bet was that lawyers are starting their research on Google. You're looking up your judge, you're looking up particular issues, and we indexed a ton of our data onto Google so that lawyers, when they're searching for something, will organically hit into our site. And then they'll see the data and be able to see the value before they decide to purchase. So it allows us to have a stream of customers that come to us with very little marketing spend. And so that has been, it was a huge shift, because originally we had collected all this data and I was very protective over it, let's say, right? And so I had to let the data free and know that the users would recognize the value and come. And so far the bet has been successful. And really, I'd say, selling in B2B to law firms is a very difficult, long sales cycle. And for a startup in particular, that is really, really difficult to withstand. So the bottoms up approach, if possible, I would recommend to most legal tech companies.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And do you, like the scope of attorneys' sizes of like firms that are using it? What are you seeing now?
So it's across the board, because generally you'll see, sort of a plaintiff's lawyer on this side and all the way up to a large defense firm on the other. And both sides need access to the information. Right. Both sides need to see how the judge rules. Both sides need to pull case documents. So it's valuable on both sides. And in fact, even more so if potentially, your plaintiff's attorney is using the product than defense firm, you have to get on board. I mean, it's unacceptable to have unilateral access to data when it's affordable, it's available. So we can have the market itself sort of help to lawyers to embrace technology.
Have you experienced in this? Have you heard the feedback from law firms who maybe are regularly up against each other in a motion practice, and one has been using it and the other finds out that they're losing more times because somebody's using your tool, and that's how they've come to you? Has that happened yet?
That hasn't happened yet. We get reach outs from attorneys after they finished a motion that they thought would take them a week, and they were able to do it, in a number of hours, and they're so excited. So we get those kinds of reach outs. But I look forward to the day when someone came in because they got beaten by a Trellis user.
Well, go ahead, Kim.
No, I was going to say, have you actually, so I know you got some reach outs on that. Have you actually tracked any of that data on like reduction in time?
So certainly in reduction in time, we have numbers on even just docket searching, right? If you're going to each separate state court website and you're putting in your docket number and you're pulling your case information, I mean, that takes a number of minutes for even your support staff that you can't get back. That can be done through one interface through us. So that's time saving right there just for support staff. Same with your motion practice. You're able to solve the part of motion practice which is most difficult sometimes, which is the organization. How do you organize your argument in a cohesive manner so someone's not going to be lost? And the nice thing about judges' rulings are they get to the heart of the matter, they break it down really well. And so when you come at writing your motion from the perspective of the judge's analysis, you're likely to be successful, more persuasive.
This is the same idea as writing that essay in law school or college, where you know how the professor thinks and you write it to them so you get the good grade.
Exactly.
I mean, it's the same idea.
It's like having the answer to the test, right? You can see the outline of the answers and you say, okay, and now I'm going to insert my facts, but I get the general idea.
Yep, that's great. We have a question from Colin Levy. Colin, I want you to reach out to Trellis.Law as well. Colin's got a great blog on legal tech. You should really interview Nicole Clark. He asks, how hard has it been to capture court data and then convert it into the format you need it to be in? And this is, I'm interested to see the growth that you've had in this, because I know that was a problem
It continues to be difficult.
Sure.
There's no, we haven't solved it so that it's not difficult. We've gotten much, much better at it. So the difficult part actually isn't bringing the data in initially, the scraping of the data and the bringing it in. Although that does have to be done for every separate county court. So for instance, if we take California, San Francisco, separate from San Diego, every court hosts and maintains their data separately. And so you have to really code into each separate court. But that's actually the easy part. The hard part is structuring the data. This is messy, raw data in every format you can imagine. I mean, if there is a way it can be done, some court has done it that way. And then we have to take all of that and normalize the data and structure it so that anyone would be able to make meaning out of it. And that's where our technology really sets us apart, and one of the reasons why it's difficult for other people to get into the space.
That's fantastic. And I see Kim shaking her head.
I mean, well, like, because of I mean, it's just amazing how outdated our courts are. I mean, I'm really interested now that we're post, after COVID happening and everything, like how, do you see quicker adoption, thinking, wow, how do I get these things? Are you thinking, well, what are my strategies on getting this information as you're looking to go into these other states to really expand the reach of the platform? So like, what are some of your thoughts around that?
So COVID has been really interesting. I think COVID has hit legal particularly hard. I think that there were a ton of law firms that never needed to have a surplus of cash that they could rely on a certain amount of runway. And so particularly SMBs, and you also see it across the board at the large firms, cuts across the board. So it's really hit legal fairly hard right now. And one of the reasons that certainly affects us is the courts are closed. This is something we didn't consider. If you had asked me prior to this, would there ever be something that could close the courts? I would have absolutely not. That's insane. So this has been an entirely new thing where there's almost a pause in litigation right now. But it's this really interesting time where what we're finding is our current users are using the product because they know what's coming. So they know there is a boom in litigation to come. COVID is just creating, and it's gonna be a bloodbath out there. I mean, there are causes of action in everything we can think of. And so what we're seeing right now is that lawyers are getting super strategic about their cases so that they can be ready to move forward when it does pick up again and when litigation resumes. But it is interesting. It hasn't affected us in terms of bringing our data in, but it certainly affected our market in terms of, we are a product for litigators, and the courts are closed. So that can certainly put strain on.
I wonder if that will lead you to be a part of the conversation about changing court systems, right? Because you've touched state courts in a way that, like you said, no one else has done the work. So like now you have this insight into, remember hearing you say what New York and California represent a quarter, right?
Absolutely.
Of it. Yep. So if that's, to think how much insight into the sheer number and differences and inconsistency or not, but like how we can streamline and create efficiencies in a system that is broken, as we can see, like the courts have to stop, right? Yep. So I'm interested in seeing like the work you do, like the future of it, how it pushes like access to justice and how it actually drives that conversation as well.
I love that you see that as well, because ultimately at a core, what we're doing is making the law accessible. We're making it so that you can start on Google and you can find what's actually happening in our trial court system right now. And that historically has been an entire black box where the public doesn't have information, lawyers don't have information, there's just no knowledge. And so we're really opening that up and bringing transparency. And the thing about shedding light on something is that then you can actually see where some of the problems lie, where some of the inefficiencies lie. So I think that's huge in terms of us being able to see what's broken and continue to try to be a part of the conversation, like you mentioned. I'm actually really excited for what I see, which is courts are already starting. So some of them are figuring out how to go remote, or they're starting to hear their sort of essential cases remote. That's going to continue to ramp up because I don't see the courts opening up in full force again in the very near future, which means they've got to figure out a different way. and necessity is the mother of innovation, right? So
Yep.
here we are. And the interesting thing about the ability for the courts to start to hear cases remote is there's layers and layers of inefficiencies that could be wiped away. I think attorneys historically have felt, well, you have to go in and be in front of your judge, or you won't get you won't think you're respecting the court or something like that. But the more that lawyers sort of have to embrace technology in order to do their job, the more we're pushing forward legal innovation that there's been resistance to for years. I actually see that the market, the legal innovation and sort of the digitizing of law generally is going to just absolutely accelerate now, because lawyers, they're forced to embrace, which is a good thing for the industry altogether.
And it only took a pandemic.
Right. I mean, I think I 100% agree with that.
To start helping.
To begin the process.
Right. Everyone who said no to it was forced to say, maybe, okay, fine, I'm going to do something now. Right. And so hopefully that then trickles, like you said, to the courts, because if you don't, what does 2021 look like? Right. And how does that really then impact all of the, all of our laws around making sure things.
Exactly.
And I also
really big questions.
Yeah, I mean, I also see the opportunity. I mean, I know this like B2B right now, but I mean, do you guys have future thoughts on like, B2C, like really, going after that and providing this access to information to people that are the pro se, and that, if we don't represent 70% of the need out there, then there's a lot of people going to court without us, right?
Yeah, it's very true. So on a basic level, we're actually already starting to see it. We're starting to see all kinds of folks come to the website that are not lawyers. And I'm continuously surprised, there's another use case for trial court data that I hadn't considered. But yeah, there's almost a powerlessness that comes when you aren't the lawyer, when you're in a legal matter and you're stuck and you have the only power you have is picking your lawyer, basically. Then you just kind of have to sit back and wait. And at a very, minimal level, at least what we're doing right now is giving them an ability to, if they wanted to take their time and sit through, what can be very dense legal material, to see what's happening right now and to get analytics on the judge that they've been assigned to, so they can have some insight, some hard data. And then ultimately, the goal really, really is, how can we make this law more and more accessible? How can we bring, just make it digestible generally? And that's even for lawyers. We don't have to make things as complicated as
100%. We make things entirely too complicated, but I think it's because we've hidden a lot of the data, right? We have these processes and systems that are structured in a way that it's just hard to figure it out, when it's like, if we just opened it up, we would serve more people. But I also feel like it's really interesting, because taking a step back again, kind of going down that access to justice, thought, and I'm interested in hearing a couple of the interesting use cases, just as like something that I'm interested in. But I can see too, I live in Georgia, and we just had an election, right? We're voting on a bunch of judges, and you're like, well, I mean, you have like really, the inside is hard. So I think it's so interesting that I'm just thinking as a use case, as like an informed citizen, there might be an opportunity for individuals that are doing that work too, which is not anything to do with litigation. So I'm interested, because you can get insight into how ruling is happening. Is it consistent? Are there biases happening? Are there things that we need to elevate and raise, because we can see that? So like, what are some of those interesting things that you're— And
there's even overall the sort of trend data can give you insight into bigger policies generally. So seeing, okay, well, unlawful detainer, which is basically eviction cases, those have skyrocketed in X time. Well, what's going on in society that's causing that, right? There are so many different ways to sort of slice and dice the data and look at it from different angles. One of the things that you mentioned in the election, that's another important use case. I mean, I was actually thinking about it. This was probably back a year ago when Kavanaugh was up, and here we had trial court data. We weren't focused on federal at that point, but we had gotten it. I just didn't have it for users yet. But I was thinking to myself, this could also be used politically for you to look up and see, for folks that were judges on the bench, how did they rule? And we actually get an understanding of who they are, how they could impact society. I mean, all of these things that we sort of guess at and don't really know. And those are taking sort of high level industry analysis. But what we're seeing in terms of users is continuously surprising. So, mortgage industry, real estate, insurance companies, people that are bringing claims against the insurance companies. So looking up how the bad faith rulings have happened. It's almost endless to think about the different ways that you can look at the data. I also see businesses using us for lead generation in a variety of industries, which surprised me. I hadn't thought about. So I love it when the market sort of teaches me something that I didn't know.
I can see that as a transactional lawyer, right? Like if I see someone that's always that's into these, always in litigation, and you're like, hey, you need to move to more of a proactive stance, and like, there's a reason you're always here. So let's shift. I mean, so it's interesting. Or probably, quite frankly, other people are using your data to think about other tech tools they can develop too, because that brings them a whole, set of data that we didn't have access to. So I'm really excited to see, where it goes, but as someone that like thinks about access to justice and thinking about everything that's happening, also the use cases from a really kind of thinking about societal issues that we want to, respond to and address and have data to actually utilize to make change.
And that's the thing.
And this is the data that honestly, probably most of our lawyer audience uses state court data as opposed to the federal
100%.
data, right?
There's a 30-to-1 ratio between cases filed in state court and cases filed in federal court. All of the litigation is happening at the state court level. It's the one area where it's historically been inaccessible, right? There's PACER at the federal level where you can search things, but no one has taken that approach with the fragmented, disjointed state courts.
We have a couple of questions. First of all, we have Diego. I want to thank everybody who's viewing this tonight in the Facebook group. You've brought in quite a crowd tonight, both of you.
That's awesome. Thanks, guys.
Both of you, because Diego does say there's 2 rock stars and Nick Rishwain, which is expected from Diego. And he loves all things Trellis.
Awesome.
And Sujeet asks, is there an opportunity to apply your tools against data around opposing counsel?
Absolutely.
Same cheat sheet kind of idea that helps counsel be better prepared on cases against their opposition.
Certainly. So one of the things I recommend when we're helping lawyers learn how to use a product is, so you start the case, of course, you look up your judge, but what's the next thing you usually look up? Your opposing counsel, right? Yeah. So you would enter your opposing counsel, both the law firm and the individual attorney that you're going up against. And what you'll pull are their other cases in trial court in all across different counties. And then you can narrow those by case type, you can narrow those by legal issues, but you can actually get an understanding of how they position legal matters so that when you think about the case, you're thinking strategically. You're thinking proactively from the start, which is so difficult for attorneys because they're always so busy that there's not that time. There's not the time to think about it. And so what we do is we give you that information from the start so you can think about sort of how to weave your narrative from the very start. What's the evidence that you need to prove? Because you know how they're going to argue. So it gives you just a ton of ammunition. And the same thing particularly for class actions. So class actions the settlements have to be approved by the judge. It's constitutional requirement. That means that we have the settlement figures for what these class actions are settling for, down to what bucket goes into attorney's fees and what's going to the third-party administrator, all of it. And so for class counsel, you can look up and actually see what has my opposing counsel settled this case for previously. I mean, that's a game changer in the way that you think about settlement strategy, right?
And then I could say, okay, so I have a thought though.
Okay, what do you got?
And so people always say they're afraid of tech taking over, right?
Sure.
Like, tech is going to take over. So now my opposing counsel can go see. I'm not a litigator, first of all, so shout out to all the litigators. No, thank you. But right? Although now I think it's like a little bit different, but everyone's afraid of like tech taking over.
Sure.
And like this,
Sure.
I can see someone say, oh, well, now they're going to know my strategy and they can go in.
Mm-hmm.
I just think this is an opportunity to like really kind of level up how we appear. So now you can also be strategic on not having a range of strategies. So like, there's not one that you can employ and that, you know, they're effective in different ways. And so, just like, if you're into sports, there's a lot of different plays to still make a basket, right? And so now you just have to do the different plays. And this is just an example to me of technology taking up the legal field in a way that we needed to. Like we've been stuck at the status quo because we haven't had the access. And so I think it's also the interesting side of what litigation could look like. It could just be much more interesting and much more like, thoughtful, intentional, and strategic in ways that you just, haven't had.
You're right on. I mean, that's exactly true. What having access to the data does, and even if someone else is looking up your information, what having access to that information does is allow you to get out the black letter law, the rote legal research really, really fast, so that you can focus on being persuasive. You actually have the time to focus on doing the lawyer work that is the most important for your client. So it's funny, I've had the Terminator conversation, as I like to call it, the lawyer, robots are going to replace us conversation many times. And it's a good thing. It is you can't create a robot lawyer. That's not possible. AI is not there. I would love it if it was, it's not. But what you can do is give people really awesome tools so they can be better lawyers.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yep. That seems to be the goal. And we just need to convince the masses that that's what technology does for them.
Absolutely.
A question, just as a sort of a use case question here. Have you had any judges use the platform to review their own motions or their own rulings?
That's a great question, and we have. So it's interesting, when I was first building Trellis, I think I did have some concern about how the judiciary might think about the product. But what I found is that the judges are accepting at this point. They know that the data exists. They know that the technology exists. They know that they can stick their head in the sand and avoid it, or they can see what the counsel that's appearing before them sees too. And what I've actually heard from judges is that they can do some of their, reinventing the wheel. They don't have to, because they can pull from one of their own rulings and release that. And it actually helps them with efficiencies too. So we provide access to the judiciary generally. We think it's important that everyone is able to have a same level of transparency into the information.
As someone who's worked for a judge before, also those that are working in judges' chambers are probably quite excited as well, because who's actually writing those?
Right.
Who's writing it?
Judge.
Yep.
Really funny whenever I see rulings, and I'm like, I wonder if their clerk changed.
Yeah, right. Because kind of what happens if you work behind. When I first did it, I saw that. So I think that I find it as a big opportunity to shift how we've been showing up and to create a lot of transparency. And I think being asked, a lot of transparency in that, and from education piece. And so.
Yeah. Adam Long asks a question here in the Zoom room. He says, law schools have been focused on teaching with appellate decisions for the last 100 years, because that's the data we have. He's wondering about using these court rulings, state court rulings, for example, to show the top 10 reasons that a motion for summary judgment gets rejected. Have you had that as an opportunity?
Yes, absolutely. So I actually think Trellis is this incredible educational tool for new lawyers, or all the way through for law students, and then all the way through your practice. Doing the legal research, the way that we've been trained historically, is we do this academic legal research and we try to figure out what the law should be, right? The problem is that that doesn't match with the practical situation, which is, what does your judge think the law is on that issue? And understanding that. But also, one of the things that we do on our site, we created a motions and issues library. And you can go into motions and you can see all the hundreds of different motions, and it's a great starting place. If you've never written a particular motion before, you go there, and what we break down for you think of it as a treatise, except unlike the ones you would find, on the Lexis and Westlaw, what you find is practically speaking, what's the appellate case that the trial court judges are applying right now? What is the legal threshold that is currently at the trial court level? And we give you that information. Because I think there can also be, I remember when I was using Lexis, there was always this fear that I was missing something. Is there another case that I don't know about? I can't send the partner this answer because what if there's something else that I haven't found yet? And with Trellis, you have this level of confidence that this is what's happening at the trial court level right now. These are the reasons that MSJs are getting rejected. You know, these are the evidentiary requirements for X because the judges tell you. So it makes it a lot easier to come at it from a practical standpoint.
Yeah.
Diego has a couple of questions. I think I'm only going to get to one because I want to get onto a different topic with you, but he did, and we may have discussed this previously. Okay. I know there was some outcry on Twitter about it. In France, analytics created a negative impression on the judiciary.
It's true.
Are you afraid these tools will be subject to regulations or the same type of scrutiny here in the US or regulations to avoid forum shopping?
So it's a super interesting question. I remember being really, really surprised that France took that
the approach they took.
Right, absolutely. In the US, having access to the law is such a core constitutional right that I don't see how we could ever impose to take away that level of access to the law. So I'm not particularly concerned in the same way that we have freedom of speech, that, you know, the basically mirror right to that is the freedom to access information, to access public information. And this is all public information. And so I mean, it would be a horrifying constitutional violation if we did not allow access to the law.
Right.
Although I would say, I hope it doesn't happen, but I hope that also opens up all of our bars and all of our governing bodies to say, hey, this is an opportunity to show up differently and to design a better system, and that the information is just data. I mean, and, you know, unfortunate for France to take that position, but that I do think, I'm hoping we don't, although sometimes the monopoly that is our industry right now sometimes takes those like positions that you would think, well, how does that actually solve the access to justice issues? So I'm hopeful too that it does that, because I see all these use cases that make so much sense.
We certainly see in the regulation side of things, it seems to be tipping in the direction that a lot of us would prefer it to be. And even there's been some heat on Pacer in the last year to, you know, why are they charging what they're charging for document. So it feels like we're going in the direction many of us in legal technology would prefer. So I haven't seen that kind of backlash yet, like they had in France. I do want to I know we spent a good chunk of time here on the tool, which is great because we've got a live audience who's really interested here. But I do want to ask a question that we didn't get to last time.
Sure.
And that I didn't know. You are a mother, and how? I mean, there's a lot of times that we don't think about the startup founder being a mother at the same time. How does that work? I feel like that's something we should cover since this is for startups.
Absolutely. I appreciate you hitting that. It's the first time I've ever been asked. And, you know, it's the same thing that we do where we create a narrative of sort of who we think the person is or what we expect for that person to be able to succeed. And then we just almost don't allow reality in. No, I am a mom. My daughter is 6 years old. She's about to turn 7. And it's wild. I mean, it's wild to do both. It's not any more than it was when I was litigating. I was also working, you know, horrific hours and grinding away then. And so it's very similar. I'm just a lot happier.
And how do you balance that? I guess that would be the follow-up question. So when you leave the office, it's the phone's down, and how does that work?
I wish I could say that. That's not the case. So I look at it from I'm not trying to achieve balance. And this is my own personal take. I'm not, you know, everyone needs to come up with their own. But I take this approach that I don't actually think balance is possible. I really don't. I do think that you can do your best at a variety of things. And sometimes something else is, when you're giving all of your attention to something, something else is not getting all of your attention. But I try on weekends to sort of shut down. Doesn't always work,
Sure.
but I do try and have those boundaries where after a certain point at night, I'm not, you won't expect me to be as responsive, Slack notifications are turned off, that sort of thing. And I try at least on a weekend day to really spend time focusing on her.
That's right.
Because during the week, it's difficult sometimes, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know that I've asked that question. I mean, it's just interesting that that you are the first one that I asked that question to, but I don't know that I've thought to ask the question previously. Maybe it has come up.
I actually think it's an important question, and it's not something that I ever focus on. Like, certainly I would tell you in an investor pitch meeting, I'm not like, I'm a mom.
Right.
Because I don't think that tends, the problem is you have all of these other assumptions that you make when we find out these roles that we expect. And if anything, that teaches me how to ruthlessly prioritize, because I have other things that I need to do. So it's not a question. It's almost when you need to do something, you get it done. And so it ends up being a really great way to just be absolutely ruthless in my prioritization.
Yeah, I co-sign the whole, I don't believe in balance either. I prefer to have it integrated in the way that feels good for me and a flow that feels good. And like the rest of it, you just do your best. Any thoughts on talking, as a, founder, a female founder, as, leading, I'm thinking about some of the tweets that have been going out about ABA and the other areas. And so thoughts about, being a founder, being a female founder, also like as women of color that are trying to get in this, what are the things that you have seen that maybe has impacted even from your perspective, and what you could see impact others? You've been in Techstars, all those other things. So I'd be helpful.
So I would love to paint a better picture. The reality is that funding just rarely goes to women, and it very rarely goes to women of color. It is, I think 2019 PitchBook said that women got 2.7% of all of the VC founding. In fact, one company had raised more than all of the female founders combined. Like that was the statistic that really stuck with me. One white male founder, like, wow. So the one thing I would say is I don't usually approach it as I'm a female founder. I approach it as I'm a founder, and I've got this basically specifically for investors. Like, we are the commodity. We have got we're giving them an opportunity to get in on something huge. And you have to look at it like you're not going asking for money. You're bringing an opportunity to someone, and you know what you back up. Women historically produce better results. That's just bottom line. In terms of VC-backed companies, women produce better results. And so I don't think that me, particularly being a woman, is the reason that we're able to move forward. But I do think that there's not enough funding that goes to women. I think there's a lot of reasons why. I think historically, there's so many social cues that we learn that puts women at a disadvantage specifically in fundraising. And that goes from everything from sort of the tone of our voice to the questions we get asked. We often get asked questions that are more about loss. So how would you handle this if the market went down? Whereas men get asked questions that allow them to speak to the opportunity potential. And that alone will change the way an investor is thinking about your business. And so there's all these unconscious biases that are taking place for why the situation is what it is. The only thing I can do is try and make my company more diverse. And so it's sort of, I know at the end of the day, the buck stops with me. There was actually a time, I don't know, about a year ago that I looked around and I was like, whoa, when did my company get so male? And I had to step back and say, I'm the one responsible for that. There's no one else that I can look to say, why isn't the company diverse? I have to consciously recognize that I wasn't doing a good enough job there and figure out how to bring in more diversity, which is ultimately always better for the business. I mean, that's shown across the board. So I think there was a lot of questions packed in there. I'm not even sure I answered yours.
No, I think it was great, and I don't want to keep you. I know it's 6:45, and I know you'll have a lot more to do. But I would, if you could give like, what are a couple of, but maybe one piece of advice that has led to success, and one piece that is an obstacle that you're trying to overcome, and how you're doing that. Just for we've got viewers out here. Blaine Corty, who's a former guest, who's really loving that we discussed the parenting topic.
It's awesome. I'm really glad that you asked that too. It's the first time I've been asked it, and so I appreciate you asking that.
Well, thank you.
Advice for success is just, I keep pushing forward. Like, ultimately you're going to get in probably in anything that you do, if you're taking a large risk, you're going to get a lot of no's. The no's are noise. You just have to keep pushing through. In terms of something that I continue to work on, I think that is recognizing that you know, particularly I think for lawyers, right? We almost have something to prove. We're this type A personality often, and failure is this like horrifying, scary thing. And to reposition in my mind, anytime that something didn't work out the way that I expected, that is a learning, and that allows me to get better the next time. And really understanding that mistakes are how we learn and get better. And without those, we wouldn't be able to grow. And that has served me well, but it's something I need to continue to remind myself often.
Well, because it gets hard, right? It's those, it's just so frustrating when the mistake happens. But yeah, you have to really pull yourself from it. And I too agree. I have to get in the balance, the work-life balance thing. I feel like is just kind of I'm actually just annoyed by it.
It's something we tell people so that we can make them feel bad about this thing that's not possible to achieve.
Right.
Ultimately.
Right. Yeah. I get annoyed by the question. It's like, well, if you really want to achieve something, you have to work long hours and do a lot of stuff.
100%. Totally agree.
Anything that we didn't cover that you would like to plug, anything that's coming up, any way that how people get in touch with you, anything you want to add, Nicole?
Well, one, we'd love to offer the listeners a 14-day free trial. Come on, try Trellis out, see the power, see how it can help you in your practice. So feel free to reach out to us at info@Trellis.Law and just say you saw us on LegalTechLIVE, and we're happy to get you set up.
Awesome. And the website is Trellis.Law.
Absolutely. Thank you for doing what I was supposed to do.
You're okay. That's all right.
So, Trellis.Law. And you can send any questions to info@Trellis.Law. And you can find me on Twitter at Nicole_A_Clark.
Right. And they are also at Trellis_Law, I believe, on Twitter. And Kim, and how does everybody get in touch with you?
Sure, you can. I'm across all social at KBennettLaw, KBENNETT Law. And then you also can go to my website, kbennettlaw.com, and see all the things we do there.
Excellent. All right. Don't disappear, ladies. I'll tell you about just a wrap up afterwards. Thank you, everybody, for watching and interacting with us tonight. We will be off next week, so relax. We will nerd out the week after. Talk to you soon.